Well, hello and welcome back to Jones Financial Talk. This is Nick Jones with Jones and Associates Premier Financial Solutions. Listeners, if you'd like more information about what you hear on this fantastic show today, you can go to our website to get that information at jonesfinancialtalk.com, or you can just give us a call at 541-500-4321. If you do go to the website, you can click on the radio page. Once again, at jonesfinancialtalk.com. You can subscribe to this program on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, even YouTube Music and Amazon Music. And the ideal scenario for me is if you reach out and ask specific questions that we can then cover on our show on a weekly basis, like the one that we got today. I find that lots of clients that are getting ready to retire need to talk a lot about the types of expenses that are waiting for them when they retire. And so we're going to go through some information on different expenses that you should expect and how that will possibly change your outcome and in retirement. But before I do that, let me bring in our co-host, Mr. Tony Shore, who's going to help us explore that topic. Tony, how are you?
I'm doing great, Nick. Great to see you and great to be on the show. Thanks for that. Thanks for having me on. And, it's exciting. We're coming off a big weekend and I really had a good one. I got a lot accomplished. My wife and I went down and spent some time with my parents, which is good. And we helped my dad get moved into assisted living finally. So that's been a long ongoing process trying to get him find a good place. And now he's in the same place where my mom has been for the last couple of years. So yeah, that's all going great. How about you? Did you have a fun weekend?
I did, yes. Got to visit a lot with family as well, and nicer weather here is always warranted during the summer months. We're getting into the summer months now, so beautiful here in the Rogue Valley.
Excellent. Yeah, that's great. Well, and you picked a great topic today too. I mean, retirement expenses are waiting, right?
They definitely
and
are.
Are we ready? That's the big question. And there are a lot of big expenses in retirement, some unexpected, some expected. But even the ones that are expected, Nick, I think people, oh yeah, I know I'll have probably some taxes or something in retirement, but they don't realize, or maybe some travel, but they don't quite realize or think about it. Like, what's it actually going to cost and how do I need to budget for that and work it into a full retirement income plan, right?
That's right. And that's a perfect segue because, many times clients come into our office and I help them organize an income plan that realistically we think is going to provide everything that they need during retirement. But there are so many things that could kind of mess that plan up. And we talk a lot about that. What are those, things that could divert the plan in a specific way? And so many of those are large expenses. And I know that many people obviously plan for some of these and think, okay, I'm going to allocate about this much money for that or whatever. But the point is, we've got to talk through those things because they're going to change for every specific situation. The biggest thing, Tony, you mentioned it right there with going down and helping your dad get into assisted living. Healthcare expenses for sure are going to be probably more expensive than what you would expect when you're in retirement. And the difficult thing for most people is when they retire young in their 50s or 60s or even early 70s, they're typically pretty healthy. And so it's really difficult to think, oh, I'm going to have tons of expenses for healthcare that I'm going to need to deal with when I'm totally healthy. But the point is, for most people, you have to consider your needs of what they're going to be later in life in your 80s and your 90s. And if you've got an example in front of you, like you do with your folks, then that's just kind of right in your face and you get the ability to be able to see it firsthand. But if you don't have that, it's still something you got to plan for.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to spend all of your money in your first, 10 or 15 years of retirement to then not have anything left for medical expenses later in life is a big point of what I'm trying to make here.
Yeah. And some people think regarding healthcare costs or medical costs in retirement, they assume, oh, I'll have Medicare. That'll cover it when I'm 65 or when I retire. But Medicare does not cover everything. And healthcare expenses go up and up. There's still premiums and deductibles and co-pays and still drug co-pays. And
Yep.
other types of supplemental, and it doesn't cover everything. Medicare doesn't cover vision, dental, hearing, or long-term care. So you've got to plan for all that. So that's a really good point. And it costs, they really do say costs are just going to keep going up, aren't they?
Yeah, I read a specific article recently that talked about how experts believe that healthcare costs could jump as much as 5% a year for the next 30 years.
Wow.
And if you think about that, cost of living adjustment in just healthcare alone at 5% a year. I
That's
mean, that's
crazy.
that's pretty incredible, right?
Yeah,
And so
that's nuts.
you've got to understand that, okay, you're retiring when you're healthy and you're 60, but 20 years from now, what are healthcare expenses going to be? And if they're going to increase at 5% a year, but you're only planning for a 1.5 or 2% increase a year in your cost of living, when you're doing your adjustments with your advisor, that's a big difference, right? And so you just got to talk through that and make sure that you understand where these, these potential landmines are going to be when you decide to retire.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I think that's going to be huge. Obviously, you're going to have those expenses. What other expenses are waiting out there for us that we might not be thinking about or putting into our retirement budget?
Another big one that I run by a lot with clients after they retire is maintenance costs to their home. When you're working and you live in your home, you have to replace the water heater, you have to replace the refrigerator, you've got to do something major like replace the roof. But because you're working, you typically have a little bit better earning potential to be able to offset some of those costs, right? Lots of those costs for the maintenance in your home are going to still be there when you retire. And so you really have to think through and budget that appropriately.
Yeah.
Even things like, Tony, like, in-home services, like maintenance for your yard or cleaning is a big one that comes up where, you would think, oh, I don't need help cleaning or mowing the lawn or something like that. But when you get older, you do need help with those types of things. And so that's going to be an expense that definitely, um, you know, could derail some of your, monthly income for sure.
Yeah. Even if you move into a place that's like senior living or a place where you don't have lawn upkeep, there might be an HOA association fee or something that you have to pay, and those can be association fees in certain developments. Can be really, like if you rent a townhome or a condo or something, or purchase a condo, those association fees can get really costly.
Totally, they can. You're exactly correct, and so that's a big one. I would say also a lot of people budget quite a bit of money for travel when they retire.
Traveling in retirement, yeah, that's huge. Obviously, I know a lot of people that when they retire, they plan on traveling quite a bit, taking the kids to Disney World, visiting all the national parks, maybe
Yep,
even buying an RV, and that's all gonna cost money, isn't it?
it sure will. And the point I'm trying to make here is, most people travel earlier when they retire, earlier in life, and so maybe your budget that you have organized for travel is going to turn into something later.
Mhm.
Maybe some of the money that you budget on an annual basis for travel can then be used for maintenance of your home or healthcare expenses as you age, because you're probably not going to travel, as extensively as you did when you're younger forever.
That's true, but those early years of retirement are gonna be travel heavy, so you've got a budget for it then, and then that's gonna, drop off to nothing, no travel. So, yeah,
Yep.
that's a good point. That's a good point, and one thing that, we didn't go into, yet too deep on this segment, but I've gotta believe that, longevity is another it's not necessarily an expense, but as you were talking about this, people are living longer and longer, and therefore
Definitely.
going to need more money. So really, that's another area where people are going to need money that they're probably not planning on. My grandfather, Nick, I've talked about him before on the show, lived to 101, right?
Amazing.
And he
Amazing.
was active past 100.
Yep.
He was active past the age of 100. and doing things and camping. He bought a new camper at the age of 100. I kid you not. It's isn't that crazy?
I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
Well,
So he was going, but it just not everybody's going to be in that situation, but people are living longer, right?
well, if you look at the statistics too, we've talked about this before on the show because of long-term care services. A healthy couple that's the age of 70 today has a 30 to 35% chance that one of the spouses, one of the two, is going to live to the age of 95. So,
Yeah.
I mean, that's 25 more years,
Yeah.
25 more years, and a 30% chance. You don't want to be in a situation where you're overspending too much initially and then don't have the care and the things that you need for later in life. That's the
Sure.
point, Tony, we talked about travel just a second ago. Another big one that comes up with lots of clients is transportation costs and needs.
Sure.
Because when you retire, you clearly still need some very reliable transportation.
Obvious.
And things like having to replace a car, or just even doing basic vehicle maintenance is a big drain on people's budgets for sure.
Hmm.
Um,
That's one
so that's
I
something to
hadn't
consider.
thought of. Yeah, that's what I hadn't thought of is transportation. I think of travel, but you're right. Just having and maintaining a car and the insurance, those costs are going to keep going up. And as you age, you might not trade in for the new vehicle. And so you're going to have more maintenance. And if you do, you're going to have more car payments. So it's going to be one or the other, right?
Yep.
So, yeah. So anyway, that's a really good one, I think. And it kind of goes hand in hand with travel, but it doesn't. Even if you're not traveling, you need a vehicle typically, and eventually that will drop off as you get old enough. But my dad is 80; he's still driving. He has two
Yep.
vehicles, so
Yep. And
yeah,
that is something that can really do hardship to a retirement account. I'll give you an example. Clients think that when they retire, they don't have the earning potential. So then they say, okay, well, I need to go buy a new car that's $30,000 or $40,000. And a lot of times they'll call in and say, just send me the money. I gotta buy a new car. But the point I'm trying to make here is that could be very, very detrimental. If you're taking 10, 15, 20% of your retirement account and buying a vehicle with it, that's difficult. Now, there should be other ways you can deal with that, right? A couple of ways are maybe you get a loan for the vehicle. And a lot of clients say, I can't get a loan. I don't have any money. Well, yes, you do. You have retirement assets and you have a fixed income. And although you might not think that you can afford it, instead of you taking 40 or 50,000 out of your account at one time and paying taxes on that, why don't you just take it out at $400 or $500 a month over a long period of time? And hopefully, if your advisor has helped budget things correctly in your accounts and are producing income in some way, you can offset that. A lot of clients that I'm sitting down with right now, if I'm looking at the rolling 1 year periods, we have recouped the majority of the distributions that they've taken out. And yes, we've had a good market, but the point is, if you're generating income on a regular basis from your portfolio, it gives you leverage. What does it give you leverage for? To make these types of decisions, right? You're not held hostage by thinking that you got this bucket of money that you can't touch. And so that's just a very important point. It's interesting when I bring new clients onto our firm, because I explain to them how often we're going to be meeting and the types of things that we're going to be talking about. Like, well, I've never talked to my financial advisor about buying a car or refinancing my house. I mean, do you make money doing that? I'm like, no, I don't make any money doing that. But what I do do with that is I'm able to help you adequately budget and figure out, oh, are there more creative situations and ways that you can benefit from that?
sure.
So that's a huge thing.
Yeah. Yeah, that is huge. And so you have to work with a financial professional who is going to take a holistic view of the big approach. And I know, myself and our listeners are only going to go through the retirement process and retire once in their lives.
That's right.
You go through it every day.
That's right.
You're going through retirement process every day with folks. So I encourage our listeners out there to pick up the phone and give you a call at 541-500-4321, or even better, just go to jonesfinancialtalk.com. Now, we've talked about travel and transportation. What's next?
So other utility costs are going to come up as well, right? So
Sure.
utilities always increase: the cost of cell phones, the cost of power every day, the cost of gasoline. And so all of those types of things you obviously need to have a handle on, um, and need to budget correctly for that. So many things, unfortunately, typically have a cost of living adjustment that's substantially more than what you get in Social Security. Okay. And so the main point here is you're going to have lots of things that you need to budget for on a monthly basis, like utilities. And then you're going to have those one-time things that happen, like replacing the water heater or tires on your car. You got to have multiple buckets, and you've got to be able to organize it correctly when you're thinking about that with your advisor to make sure that you are planning for those two different types of things.
Yeah. Yeah. Utilities, that's something that people think, well, that's not going to be that bad, but they do add up, and there are expenses. You still need a phone. You're going to want to have TV that costs money, cable TV or streaming television. I see these expenses helping my mom and dad on how many things come up.
Sure.
And yeah, and it's just utilities are a big one.
Yep. And, thinking of other monthly costs as well, there's plenty of things that you can do that will help you in many ways, like maintaining your health. And if you maintain your health long term, it's going to help save you money. But if you think about it, there's lots of things that you're going to spend money on to help the health
Right.
and the wellness, right? I mean, if you can stay healthy, that's a great return on your investment. Gym memberships or similar memberships of other situations are going to come up, and you need to be able to do those things. And so if you're talking with your advisor about your Medicare plans or Medicare Advantage plans, maybe that's a huge topic that needs to be reviewed. Rather than having to spend a couple $100s a month on a gym membership, maybe you can combat that in a different way.
Yeah.
The idea here is there are tons of expenses that you shouldn't be worried about, and that are going to make you healthier, and that are going to make you enjoy retirement. You just need to adequately plan for those. And
Yeah.
so this is a big one.
Yeah, that is too. And you mentioned like going to like a YMCA or a gym membership, or whether it's pickleball is really popular and a lot of people are playing that. That's also, not only is it good for your health, and if you stay healthy, you're going to spend less in retirement on healthcare. It's going to save you money by staying healthy in the long run, like you say. And there's a social aspect of it too, right?
That's right. Now, I have another topic to kind of discuss with you that's a little difficult sometimes. Um, when you're parents, when you are a parent of somebody, you're
Yep.
used to spending money on them and giving
Yeah.
them things, right?
Yeah.
You have to be strategic about how you spend money on your kids and your grandkids when you retire. You can be totally generous and have fun with them without going overboard. I see this a lot. It's very difficult when you're at the stage of life where you get great enjoyment out of helping your kids and your grandkids, but you don't have the resources or the money to do that. And so you have to be very, very careful about how that's going to affect things with
Right.
with your own expenses. If you're continuously giving lots away, you're going to run into a situation where eventually you don't have enough to take care of yourself. So you got to be strategic. You do that in a bunch of different ways. You talk to your advisor about strategic gifting and how that can work and be beneficial, but you also just have to be realistic with your children and your grandkids about that. You're not the money pot that has to pay for everybody.
Right. Right. Yeah, that's true. And there are ways, if you do want to help out with you, let's say your grandkids' college education, put a little money in at a time over a longer period of time, like in a 529 or a special IRA or a Roth, something like that. And I know you help set up those types of things for your clients as well, correct?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. And there's lots of other things that financially are going to affect your situation, like a death in your family or
Yeah.
divorce or, new grandkids or something like that. And so the point is, those things are going to occur. And before you make a decision about giving money towards them, you need to think about how it's going to affect your monthly budget and long-term perspective.
Sure. Yeah, you definitely do. Now, this has been a great discussion so far. And once again, listeners, if you have questions or want to set something up with Nick and his team there at Jones and Associates, just go to jonesfinancialtalk.com. You can listen to this episode, past episodes, pick a topic that you're interested in, and give that one a listen or a view. But we're talking today about retirement expenses that are waiting and whether you're prepared. What's another expense that you think our listeners need to know about, Nick?
Well, I've been thinking a little bit as we've been talking, Tony, and if you think through what strategies you should have, right, for helping people think through this, it really comes down to wealth planning.
Yeah.
And wealth planning is much more than just a strategy to build as much cash as possible. It's something that you need to take very seriously, and that you need to make sure your advisor is helping you with building this income plan and wealth plan that's in place. It provides a complete and personalized picture of what's going on currently, like what we've been talking about with your expenses, but then what future finances are going to look like, and what types of things are going to be roadblocks, like we're talking about today, that are going to potentially give you some risk in your length of retirement. And
Yeah.
so a wealth plan is incredibly important to think through when you're discussing retirement planning with your advisor.
Yeah. Well, and having a wealth plan or an income plan, a retirement income plan, you're right. Two things that are roadblocks are risk and longevity. How long you're going to need that money for, and we mentioned that earlier. But you're right. Having a plan in place is a great way to solve some of these issues.
Yeah. And every new prospect that comes to our firm pretty much is looking for something in writing that shows that, right? And so our
Right.
blueprint process that we go through, that we've talked about on the show before, that I've if listeners, if you're interested more in that, you can go to our website and request one of my books, which is called The Knowledgeable Retiree. It just kind of outlines this whole blueprint plan that Tony and I refer back to on our shows. But the beginning of this wealth plan is taking inventory, considering all the assets that you have and your income sources and expenses, but it also addresses things like inflation and how these different expenses we're talking about today are going to change things for you. And so you have to start with that. You got to think about the goals that you're going to put forth with your advisor, and what goals you have for them, and how they're going to be able to help you with that wealth plan, and organize it correctly. Because typically when we go through this blueprint, Tony, we work in reverse, and we define the goals that we need before we begin the kind of the investment strategy, almost the last thing. And it's interesting, but listeners that listen to the show on a regular basis probably understand it. Like, how often do we talk about individual investments on this show? Hardly ever.
No.
Hardly ever, right? And it's not about that. What it's about is building an investment strategy and wealth plan for your specific situation. And if you do it from that perspective and work in reverse, it's much easier to make sure that you're accomplishing the goals of your clients. And so, that whole blueprint process that we go through, and how we organize things is so important, because it estimates people's income through a much longer period in time, and it reduces the possibility of outliving your money. And
Yeah.
that is a key thing. That's a huge goal for most clients of ours. And so it's just imperative to discuss those types of things.
Well, sure. Yeah, you definitely want to do that. And I mean, we don't talk about individual investment strategies because that depends on a person's situation. But you do go over that with your clients and look at where they're at. And once you get the right information, you're going to look and see what's in their best interest. As a fiduciary and a financial advisor, you're really looking out for their best interests. And for our listeners, you really need to have a solid strategy and know where your money's at. You can't just say, well, I got a 401k or an IRA or, what have you, and then I'll have Social Security, I'll be fine. You need to know what you'll have and when and where it's at. And that brings us back to the risk. We've talked on past shows a lot. Nick, you've talked a lot about risk and managing your risk and knowing what your own personal risk tolerance is. And it's different for everybody, but if you're using that money to live on in retirement, as far as your retirement income, you don't want all that money at risk. You want to make sure that money's going to be there, right?
That's right. And depending on your specific situation, that might lead me to help you determine what types of assets you might want to own and what types of investments we might want to discuss and talk about. And so, again, kind of reverse engineering maybe in order to accomplish the goals that you're setting forth and tell me are important to you. That will kind of help me figure out different topics to mention to you and to talk to you about. Is
Sure.
outliving your money more important, or is long-term care more important, or
Right.
what are the hot buttons that kind of you think are going to come up in your life based on your family history? That's why we talk about what happened to your parents. That's why Tony mentions it on the show today. I mean, Tony, not to get too personal with him, but if you think about his grandpa that lived till 101, and both his parents are healthy in their 80s, mid 80s today, let's say, or 80s, but he sees that they're going into assisted living and long-term care facilities. It's reasonable for Tony specifically to expect that he might be in that situation 30
Yeah.
years from now,
Yeah.
right? So
Exactly.
if you've got it right in front of you as an example and you see what's important, learn from those examples and talk with your advisor about these specific expenses that maybe are going to be very specific just for you. That's the point.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I think that's really good. And there are a lot of financial tools out there available, and we've talked about some, but that kind of leads us to how to deal with these expenses. And there are things, everything from, like you said, investments. There's the market. There's IRAs and Roth IRAs and tax-free options, and there's annuities, and there's cash value life insurance. These are all options we've talked about on the show before. Some are better than others for different individuals, but you have to look at all the available options and figure out which is going to be best for you personally, right?
That's exactly right. The specific things that you talk about and that you organize should be tailored to exactly what you think you're going to need, and that might push your advisor to specifically consider and talk to you about different things. And if your advisor is a fiduciary and they get compensated the same for every single product that they specifically talk to you about, then that's what they should be doing. That's the true definition of how that should be working.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the problem with, some people who work for one big box company are only going to push their products or offerings, and you as an independent, you're looking at all the options for your clients, and you're not just trying to sell them insurance, and you're not just trying to get them to invest in the markets. You're looking at, hey, what do you have? Where are you at? And what are your goals? Now, what's the best way to get there?
That's exactly
And let's
right.
look at all the options available to you. So I think that's huge. That's the huge difference. And that's why you want to work with a fiduciary. Now, this has been a great discussion today, but our listeners need to get this plan in place. You need to have a written retirement income plan that incorporates everything we've been talking about and all the expenses you've told us about today, Nick, and ways to hopefully address those. How can our listeners get a hold of you?
Sure thing. Just a couple of simple ways. They can either just give us a call here in the Rogue Valley at 541-500-4321, or go to our website at jonesfinancialtalk.com and request anything there, including that retirement income plan.
All right. Well, that sounds great. And listeners, that does it for today's episode of Jones Financial Talk with our host, Nick Jones.